Good evening. Please go ahead. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, hello again. Hope you're all well. We're doing okay here. It's a very rich time for wildlife right now. All the animals are breeding. Birds and gophers and deer and raccoons and squirrels and chipmunks and all manner of snakes too. So it's quite lovely to be here. And slowly we're getting vaccinated. Jordan, what is yours?
I haven't got a date.
You haven't got a date yet. The young guys haven't got a date yet, but the older guys are almost there. So we'll see, maybe traveling in November or something. But in any case, it's nice being here. Nice to be with you. Meditation, one way to think about it is the qualities of mind that you're cultivating. And you could look at it like, say like if you're cultivating a yoga posture, you have certain elements in it. You have the breath, you have the correct posture, the extension of the posture, and so on and so forth. So you're maintaining several things at one time. So in the same way, you might look at meditation as like sustaining certain qualities of mind that would then go forward into ordinary life, because any qualities of mind you develop become a part of the momentum of your life, be it negative or positive. So that's why in meditation I'm always emphasizing the quality of attention, the quality of mind, rather than the particular object. It doesn't really matter. But if the object is attractive to you and is appealing to you, then it's going to be easier. So like we've been talking about visualizations. I never talk about visualizations because I can't visualize. So if you have a very kind of mind that visualizes a lot, maybe you can visualize things to calm your mind. But it would be the attitude that you bring to it, wouldn't it? And that attitude could be the same as you bring to the breath, or you bring to body awareness. It wouldn't really matter. So if you keep that in mind, it's not so much about an object or a technique, it's the qualities of awareness and attention. And so one of the obviously important things is presence. Be here now. But quite often when we think about presence, there's a sort of sense of, I have to be present now. I mustn't think, my mind mustn't wander, and it's a kind of forceful attempt to control things, which usually doesn't really work. For a while it might work. So another way to contemplate presence is through inquiry. And like one of the things I've been recommending over these Zoom sessions to people is this, for me, a very interesting kind of question is presence ever absent? It's a curious kind of question, you know. Inquiry is something which I've always enjoyed because it's something that, if it's interesting. It's something I can look at. Whereas control, just like a mechanical technique where I'm trying to control the mind, I've never found that really interesting. So this kind of weird, strange question: is presence ever absent? Then you really have to observe the present moment and what being is, and if you observe carefully, you'll see the sense of self comes and goes. The sense of the controller comes and goes. The sense of the author comes and goes. But does this, like conscious presence, is that ever absent? Now, I'm not asking you to answer, but I'm suggesting that that inquiry keeps you very much in the present moment. It's a very interesting inquiry. Because what happens with thinking is that we assume that we're the thinker, we're producing thought, so I haven't been mindful, and I have to stop thinking, and we try to get rid of thought and get very confused. But if you make that inquiry, you'll see that actually thought arises naturally, stimulated by memory, stimulated by intention, comes up. You might pursue it, you might not pursue it. It's a natural phenomenon. And the desire for meditators, one of the great challenges is not to fall into the desire to get rid of thought, but rather awaken to the fact that there is thinking coming and going. That's actually quite difficult. It's easy to say in 2 sentences. It's actually quite difficult. So that's one quality of mind I would say would be really very, very important to cultivate. And that cultivation is bringing up the capacity to actually really look at your mind and look at the qualities of mind rather than just following some technique which you are recommended to do and then feeling adequate or inadequate when you try that technique. It's much more interesting and much more fruitful, I think. So the second thing I would say is space. Beta, are we still okay with the internet?
Yes.
Yeah? Everyone's all right? Okay. Space. Because we so identify with the body and our emotions, our identities are so embedded in them, and they have to be in some sense. But this meditation that we just did, when I suggest to you that sound is in awareness and the body is in awareness, that I find also very interesting because, and I'm not making like a philosophical statement here. I'm just saying what happens if you use that perception? You take a perception and you play around with it. You make it interesting. So it's not like I'm not going to go to University of Toronto and argue this with the philosophy department. That's the point. But it's rather that when you bring up a perception, it affects you in a certain way, right? So I'm suggesting bring up the perception of space by what? By saying that this feeling of body is in awareness. Now that's different than, my arm hurts, or I've got acid reflux, or I'm sleepy. Those are self-identities which are necessary. They're not wrong. But here, as meditators, we're trying to get a kind of different perspective so that we find the place of non-grasping, so that we find the place of peace. And one of the components of that is the contemplation of space. So you actually do that, like this perception of this experience is in consciousness, in awareness. And then you hold your attention, like you don't. It's very subtle. It's not obvious, like putting salt on a sandwich and tasting the salt. It's not so obvious. It's more subtle. So a lot of this you have to wait, because it doesn't seem like much when you make a perception. Like, big deal. I did that. Nothing happened. Well, it's not that anything has to happen. It's more that your what is it? Your sense of who you are becomes expanded into space and consciousness, rather than I am just these complaining thoughts. So that's who I really am, or I am this heartache, or I am this physical infirmity that I might have. Those are the limited identities which come and go. But our as Luang Por Chah would say, our real home is something much grander. And this kind of suggestion of is presence ever absent, or space, that the body is in space, brings you to a much more interesting sense of who you really are. Language is difficult there. So if whatever you're doing, whatever meditation you're doing, if you bring those qualities of mind to the meditation, so if you're doing breath, you're doing this like space and knowing with breathing, with breath in and out, and you begin to abide as that knowing, as that peaceful knowing. And this is what non-grasping is about. It's the capacity to know things arising and ceasing. The third quality is related to the Brahma Viharas, and I've been using, all year I've been using more the word affection or affectionate. I love to just like take a word and then ponder it for a year. I don't read that much anymore. So one word usually does me for a while. But it's a very interesting word, affectionate, isn't it? Like, because sometimes the Pali words, they just become almost like, not cliches, but you sign your letter with metta, right? And I do metta, and it becomes almost sort of dead because it's not enlivened through inquiry. So then personally I like to just switch the words around. So the Brahma Viharas, metta, mudita, karuna, upekkha, these are aspects of love, aren't they? I would say. Right? Compassion is an aspect of love, loving kindness, joy, beauty. And I think equanimity has to be an aspect of love as well. Or affection. So you don't usually think about equanimity as affectionate, do you? But just consider that if you're paying attention to things and you're abiding with an affectionate heart, isn't it easier to pay attention? If you're paying attention to something with just like the desire to control, or desire to understand, or desire to get rid of, or desire to get, that makes it very, very difficult. Whereas affectionate attention requires nothing of the objective world. It's a quality of mind. I've been reading, I think I read in this meeting last time, this one quote which I've been pondering, and I do this too. I love to read, if I see something from a teacher who I think has gained enlightenment or has some profound insight, realization, I treasure those, especially if they are in normal language. When it's when the language is very technical, with all the jargon that religion has, that Pali Buddhism has, or whatever, then sometimes the technical words are, they're for me sometimes hard to interpret. But when they're just human beings talking about their experience, then I note that, I write it down. So I've read many times at these meetings, Luang Por Liem's enlightenment process, and then his description of it in very ordinary language and not in Pali language. That's really beautiful to read. This is from a teacher called Nisagardatta, who was much loved. I guess we were thinking when he might have died, maybe in the 80s, I'm not sure. So he was from Bombay, and I think he was a beedi salesman, was he?
Yeah.
I think he sold cigarettes. So this is his statement. And I've read this before, but these things are good to just kind of chew over. The main change was in the mind. It became motionless and silent, responding quickly, but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. And above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. That's so moving. I don't know about you, I'm very moved by that. So what I do with that kind of a reading is I not just to inspire my mind, but I kind of, I reverse engineer it. I unpack it to see, well, what about my particular practices that I do? And how would they fit in with this person's realization? Like Luang Por Liem's, there's one part in his realization when he says, things were just as they were. There were no big people, no small people. Things were just as they were. And so I unpack that myself. So how am I perceiving the world? But the part about, and above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. So to me, he's pointing to a realization that the affectionate heart isn't just a practice and an experience, but it seems to be integral to enlightenment. It's different, isn't it? Like, I can feel affectionate to someone or something as an experience because they draw affection out of me. So you might, like if you're a grandparent, the little grandchild on Zoom just brings out lovely goo goo gaga words from you or whatever grandparents do. Or if you have a pet or some beautiful thing, or your partner or whoever it might be. So things do draw us. They draw out of us the Brahma Viharas, or they open the gates to love, don't they? So when you see someone who is distressed and you can help them and you can serve them, you feel compassion, you feel the joy of generosity. That's a doorway, isn't it? And that's why it's really hard to not be with people, not be able to help people, not be able to serve people, because you don't have a doorway, do you? A doorway to that possibility of affection. But is affection and love, or whatever words we want to use, is it merely something that's dependent on an experience? Or is the experience a kind of doorway into an enlightened mind where awareness is affectionate? See what I mean? It's hard to kind of explain this. If you use the word love of course is the love of liking. I love mashed potatoes. Actually, I've never thought of that before, that I love mashed potatoes. You know what I mean? So I love as liking, yes. Love is passion, yeah. But why do all spiritual traditions, they the masters, the enlightened beings, they always talk about love, don't they? In a way which you sense it's transcendent. It's not about just an experience of just a person. So then you have a difficulty from that, is that, and this came up in our OBS meeting, the Ottawa meeting, where someone, we've had some very horrible news about the residential schools in Canada and the deaths of the grave sites, and it's just horrible. And one of our friends from the Ottawa group said, well, how can I have unconditional love? And this gets very confusing, doesn't it? Like, how can I love someone who has done malicious behavior? Maybe I cannot dwell in anger. I can do that, maybe. But anyway, and I think I was thinking about that, where the confusion might come is that I think, like, at least from a Buddhist sense, is that as I often say, Buddhism presents itself in two modes. One is the social mode, and one is the mode of phenomena. So phenomenology is a good way of thinking about the five khandhas. We're looking at the phenomenon of personal experience as it comes and goes through the senses, through the mind, through memory, through emotions, and awareness of that. And then the social mode of being, is where we talk about that it's wrong to do that. We have to have laws. People have to be held to account, and so on and so forth. And when you try to put into that social part of our life that this sort of unconditioned love, it gets confusing, doesn't it? Maybe someone can do that, but most of us would say, well, no, come on, how could that be? But if you take it to the phenomenon of the heart, then the information about the residential schools or whatever horror we've all heard about impacts us, right? We're affected by it in the heart. We're affected we get angry, and it doesn't take such horrors actually to make us angry. So we are hit by life very often in very, very negative ways, and this is just the nature of being sensitive. So how might we then cultivate a mind which is part of that result? Because whatever we do has to be part of that result, and that result is this kind of deep affection and this deep love. How might we do that? Well, personally, the way I do that, because I certainly get negative memories and reactions coming up in my mind, and so what to do, and what I noticed in the past was I was afraid of those, not in a neurotic way, just I have to do something about this anger, or have to do something about this fear. I have to fix it. I have to do metta bhavana, and I shouldn't be this way, and all that kind of judging. That, of course, doesn't work. And then I saw that I was trying to deal with these impacts through thought, and that never worked, because I'd either go into narratives of believing, or the narratives of I should be this way. There's always a judgment around it. But you can process these kinds of things with affection. What does that mean? Well, when you abide in the heart chakra, you begin to sense that affection is a possibility that is always there, through which these impacts, these sense experiences, these memories, these horrible things that come to us, these insults and whatever it might be, can be known from the heart, not just from thought. I can have a memory of being hurt by someone come up, and the memory might be strong, and it is a hurtful feeling, no doubt about it. Now, if I say to myself, I should have unconditional love to that person, that really confuses me, because what I'm experiencing in the moment is not unconditional love, it's some kind of resentment or hatred. So then I get all confused because I go to thought, right? But if I were to not automatically go to the default mechanism of thinking, but I rather allowed my heart to know this part to know, this heart part to know, then what happens is that you begin to see that awareness as affection can receive that. It can go through you. It can seem very permanent, in fact, but because you stay there, it goes its own way. So you haven't demanded of yourself unconditional love. No, you haven't said that. No, I will abide as witness, affectionate witness, to the feeling of resentment or anger or fear or whatever might comes up. And then that's possible. You can do that. You can feel the most horrible feelings, frightful feelings. If you identify with them, either you should be that, and that happens to a lot of us, doesn't it? I shouldn't have that, I shouldn't be that, I should be something else. Or you identify the other way and you run with the narrative, then you're caught. You're caught by that. Now, socially, if you go back to the social mode of talking, we have to follow the narrative. Yes, there has to be rule of law, there has to be judgments, there has to be punishment, the courts, that's all necessary. We can't live in la-la land, because there are some really bad actors and bad people So there's no denying that. And to just be a kind of Buddhist doormat and say, may all beings be free from suffering, and yes, you can take my car, and you can rob me, and you can cheat. Well, that's ridiculous, isn't it? So we don't have to be smarmy as Buddhists. We can be strong, or we can say, no, that is wrong. It's against the precepts. We shouldn't do that. Yeah, we can do that. But we can do this other thing too, can't we? We can begin to process and know these very negative things that we all experience from the heart rather than from the head. Now that's a cliche, but it's actually quite difficult to do, because when these negativities come up, they kidnap your attention into believing that this is a reality which must now be addressed either through, I have to get rid of it, or it's true. They shouldn't be that way. And that's attachment. That's what we mean by attachment. Non-attachment does not mean not happening. Those memories and karmic forces and habits still happen. That's not non-attachment. Non-attachment is knowing it, I would say, from the heart. You could say, we say knowing it as anicca dukkha anatta, but quite often that can just be a kind of dismissal, and we don't really allow this horrible feeling to become fully conscious. So if your meditation is about make conscious sound, like I suggest, and sound is in awareness, huh? And if you've done that a lot with normal, ordinary things, then when the negative things come up, you say make conscious a feeling of jealousy or hatred or resentment or lust or whatever it is. Make it conscious, let it become conscious. And if you've developed the heart, I would say for me, it's very important to spend a lot of time in physical attention at this area. Because this area, it will feel like, if you feel fear, that will actually affect your heart chakra. And by staying with your heart chakra, it will take you to love. Because you're staying in the right place. And this is the interesting thing. Where if you take fear to thought, it'll take you to more fear. Or distraction, you do something. But any of these powerful feelings that we have can be registered here. It can be known here. And that, I would say, is affection. That capacity. It's not so obvious when it's very powerful and very negative, and you have to kind of just allow it to do so. Our practices of metta bhavana, I would say, are ones that enliven the heart. So you do associative memory. You actually contemplate the word affectionate. What does it mean to be affectionate? What does that feel like? And you use imagination. And think of someone. You think of your mom or your dad or your kids, and you bring them up. Oh, this is what affectionate feels like. But where does it feel like? Where does that feel like? And that feels like here. At least I find that. And so by investigating or contemplating, not just doing a kind of rote practice, like I'll do my grandkids first, then I'll do my kids, and then I'll do my husband, I'll do my wife, and then the dog, right? You kind of, maybe the postman too. It's kind of a rote thing, but it's usually in thought. But actually, all you need is one person to know affection, right? You don't have to know the universe, because affection is affection. So if you know affection, you don't have to do the whole world. You just have to stay with affection. So then you can revive that. So what does it feel like to be affectionate? How does it affect your throat? I find if your throat is tight, you don't touch the heart. So you go investigate, physically, what would affectionate feel like? You might do that when you feel like compassion for someone who's going through a rough time. Rather than just their narrative, which you want to attend to, you want to help, but what does it feel like? What is compassion really like? It's a form of affection, right? When your kids are successful and they have a really, or beauty. Beauty does that too. Beauty does that. It brings up a sense of, oh yeah, that's nice. And this is not, you don't just have to go through thought. Like beauty, usually people miss beauty because they want to take a picture. And then after that they want a selfie. So what's that about? Whereas to actually be with beauty and be conscious of beauty, how does that affect you? Where does it affect you? Right? Beauty is an entry into the Brahma Viharas. It's mudita. And what a waste to take a selfie. Total. Go ahead and do it, but then go back to the beauty. What's that like? And this is where you have to see that meditation has a lot of sense of pausing, because it's subtle. It's not obvious. So when I say make conscious beauty, okay, I'm making it conscious. So what's next? Just take a photo. No. You have to wait. You have to be patient and allow these kind of subtleties to become apparent. So the exercises like these, the ones that I suggest in meditation, are very much about then bringing it to ordinary life. Let's say you feel you have to meet someone, and you have some aversion to them. Usually oh God, I have to meet that person, and oh yeah, what am I going to do? That's thought, isn't it? And that's the future, and that's anxiety. And then you say, oh, make conscious the feeling of having to meet this person. What's that really like? Make that conscious. And where is it in the body? And these are very rewarding things to do, because if you just take it to the narrative, that cycle of rebirth just goes on and on and on and on, ad nauseum. It just keeps going and going. But if at any moment you say, oh, to make conscious this feeling of anxiety that I have to meet this person who I really dislike. Because we usually have a fear of that. We don't want that. We have to fix that. We want to go there. That not wanting is tanha, vibhava tanha, and that prevents the awakening. But if we go to that and not try to fix it, and just allow the heart to feel it, then you'll find it resolves itself, and you come into spontaneity. And this is what this reading, I think, is pointing to. If I could go back to that. The main change was in the mind. It became motionless and silent, responding quickly, but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. We all have that, don't we? We perpetuate an encounter for 2 hours. You said the wrong thing, or they said the wrong thing, and you feel, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and that's not fair. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. No. This happens in interviews and retreats. People, they've been meditating, and then all of a sudden they're going to meet the ajahn, and then now they rehearse. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? So they rehearse for the whole day before the interview. Then the interview comes, then they replay. Oh, I shouldn't have said this, and he'll think I'm an idiot. The response is perpetuated. We all do that, don't we? And what is that? What is that? A sense of self, and it's worry and all of that. But what would spontaneity be there? Well, yeah, you feel anxious to see the teacher because the teacher is the authority figure and all that. And that's natural enough. But if you felt that reaction here, and you really knew it, then that's what spontaneity is about. You really know it, and you don't perpetuate it with thought for 2 hours, or 2 days, or 3 days, or whatever it might be. Yeah? So if you find your mind is perpetuating some scenario, what is that about? And how do you work with that? Do you just try to get rid of it? Many people just distracted, then it comes up again. You're distracted, you go to sleep, there it is in the morning again. Well, how would you do that? Well, how not to perpetuate it would be not to get rid of it, but to know it as a feeling tone, as a heart tone. And then if you trust in that, you come back to spontaneity. You have to receive life, and life is often very awful, no doubt about that. But how can you receive it, know it, be it? And like in the Zen, they say, burn up the whole experience, leave no ash. How can you do that? Well, you can't do that through thought. Thought can be, it can be calculating, it can be planning, it can do all kinds of things, yes, and that's good. And most of us know how to do that, but this perpetuation of self and perpetuation of emotion in the different kinds of scenarios we have, How do you resolve that? You go to the heart. Don't try to get rid of it. Don't try to fix it. Just know it. And then it resolves itself, because it is anicca. It is changing. It's not your real home. It's not who you really, really are. So let me read that one more time to leave that just to close, because it's such a beautiful reading. The main change was in the mind. It became motionless and silent, responding quickly, but not perpetuating the response. Spontaneity became a way of life. The real became natural, and the natural became real. And above all, infinite affection, love, dark and quiet, radiating in all directions, embracing all, making all interesting and beautiful, significant and auspicious. Ewan. So I'll leave that for your reflection.
Thank you, Luang Por. Let's all say 3 sadhus together. Andamayang Ovadagatha sadhu karang kadama se.
Sadhu, 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 anumodhami.
Any questions, Bita? Bita, you got any
Yes, Luang.
customers?
Yes, so we'd like to now open the floor for questions and answers. So if anyone has got a question, kindly please click on the raise hand button, and we will invite you to unmute. In the meantime, Luang Por, please allow me to read some questions that come through from the feedback form, the questions and answers forms.
Okay.
First question. Hi, Ajahn. Thanks for taking up this question. May I know if you have any advice on the thing?
I lost you there. Say it again, Bita.
How can one practice the Dharma
Okay, Tatiyampi, I still didn't get it.
It is really challenging. For the third time, Luang Por, the question is around how can one practice the Dharma when one is sick?
Okay, thank you. Well, it depends on what you mean by Dhamma. So, if you just have some baseline ideas, like first and foremost, to practice Dhamma, one needs to awaken to the way things are. So if you take Luang Por Sumedho's suggestion, it's like this. Very powerful. Simple, but very powerful. It's like this, and then pause, then that's practicing Dhamma. Because you're knowing the way things are, whether you like it or not. So that's always the entry point into practicing Dhamma, is the awakened mind. So then within that, with sickness, actually I think you should teach this one. We have a monk here who has a lot of chronic illnesses, and he'd be great, but he's shy. Next time. So illness is both physical and emotional and social, right? So there's a lot of negative inputs. And what can you work with? Well, if you have a basis of seeing illness in space, not outer space, but if you have a way of understanding, when I say that sound is in awareness, if you have a way of noticing illness in its pain or its nausea or whatever, from some sense of objectivity, that's a huge step. That's a huge step. I realize it's difficult. Like if you have nausea, it's just so overwhelming. So that sense of Luang Por says it's like this, to see that there is the object of pain and there's the aversion to the pain, all of that's going on. But awareness is not averse, awareness just knows. So then you start to wake up to the aversion to the pain or the nausea. So you start to make not just the pain your object of awareness, but in this case, the aversion to the pain. Are we losing the plot? It's not, it's breaking up, is it? Frozen. We're frozen. It's unsatisfactory, Beta.
We are back now.
It's dukkha. So should I start again?
No, just continue.
Okay. Sorry, folks, but it's cloudy. I guess it's the clouds that are doing it. Anyway, there's pain and there's aversion to pain. There's worry, all the different factors. So the more you can, if you take up, I would say, vibhava tanha, the aversion to pain, the aversion to sickness, not wanting this state of mind. The not wanting is what you can work with. The pain itself, the sickness, you have to use whatever medical facilities you have. But the aversion would be the thing you want to make conscious. So, like, just in meditation, for those of us who have bodily pain, which is all of us, just start to use body pain as the object of awareness, and you'll see that body pain has aversion in it because you don't want it. So if you can learn that lesson of aversion to pain in meditation, that will click in when you have a more serious illness. That's very important. Like when you, at the end of a sitting, everyone seems frozen on the screen in front of me. I get a feeling this isn't working. Yeah, everyone is. You're all like on a beta, help.
We have you here, Luang Por.
You can hear me?
We still have you.
Oh, great,
Yeah,
okay,
we can
because
still hear you.
you all look like you're on one of those airplanes and the oxygen's run out. Okay, so like in meditation, one of the things you want to learn to do is, as you approach the end of a meditation, you're going to have discomfort, you have pain, and you'll start to look at the clock, right? And that's aversion to pain or aversion to discomfort, and that's very important to actually make conscious. What do I not want? The not wanting, or the hoping, or the expecting of the meditation to end. And that lesson you get each meditation, because quite often that happens, unless you're really, really centered. Most people feel that. And so then the lesson is not just to endure until the half hour is over, but to see, oh, there is pain, and what's the difference between pain and aversion to pain? So the more you can bring that lesson in, then that's the lesson of sickness. But chronic sickness, and you have to be very, very patient and spread a lot of loving kindness to the body, because you get a lot of aversion to the body. The body's like not behaving itself. So metta, or loving kindness, or affection for the body. And just be willing to learn. Make sickness your teacher. That's your ajahn, isn't it? And you have to do that. What else choice do you have? Rather than think, if I wasn't sick, I could meditate. Well, yeah, maybe. But if you say, no, sickness is my meditation. this is my lesson. This is what I have to learn about. I don't like it, and so on. But no, I want to see, can I abide as affectionate witness with sickness? Can I do that? Can I witness this? And then I struggle. I struggle with not just the sickness, the aversion to the sickness. Okay? Are we on board?
Yes. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you good.
Okay. A second question, Luang Por.
Okay.
So this person is asking that, dear Luang Por, here's the plot, JB. And she was not ready to have the baby. Living a stressful life and didn't feel she could adequately care for the child. The birth would have only increased the suffering for all parties. Years later, upon embracing the path, the mother is sad at having denied that life, the chance at nirvana. Karmic consequences aside, the mother now seeks to make amends. What would that look like? Are there any other ceremonies that the mother can perform? Thank you.
Well, the mom needs a lot of compassion. So the more she can see how... Actually, this question came up at the OBS meeting. When a young woman has to go through, that's absolute torture for everyone, for her. So if she could look back at that young person and say, oh, you poor thing, you really went through it, and now you're still suffering. So compassion is obviously the way, rather than judgment. So self-judgment on this issue is not going to be not going to be helpful. So if she could just think of who that person was, who that suffering person was, and how difficult and whatever, and just say, may you be free from suffering. To use that image, imagine that person and send compassion, or bring that person into the compassionate heart. And that's what this is calling for, isn't it? It's asking for compassion, not judgment. And then in terms of ceremonies are good. You know, we have all kinds of, if there's a monastery nearby, the monks or the nuns might know some kind of ceremony. And it doesn't really matter what the ceremony is. It's somehow to do something, to kind of make merit, to offer a meal, or to do some good works in the memory of this being. And say, like to say, ask for forgiveness. These are good things to do. But the feelings of guilt, that might be perpetuated, these are in thought. You know, and when the person made that decision, then they made that decision. That was the best they could do. And now later on they have a different perspective, and now there's a different kind of person there. And guilt doesn't help. Remorse is good because it makes you a better person, but guilt is just a form of self-hatred. So when remorse comes into consciousness, actually it's a very, very compassionate mode of being. And so what if the person takes this sense of remorse to the heart, then it could be very painful, but it'll be very opening, very compassionate. If she takes it to thought, the remorse is transformed in an ugly way into guilt and into self-narrative, and that's really even more pain. Enough pain already, right? So that's what I would suggest: is do some rituals, and that's fine. Make merit, but allow this to be held in the heart, even if it's very, very painful. Allow it to stay there and see what happens. Because that is compassion itself. That's difficult. Life is just, you can look back at life and say, if only, We used to have a joke in our family: if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bus. I don't know why we had that. So when everyone came up with an if, someone would say, yeah, if your grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bus. So those are, this is the way we think. But life just kind of unfolds in ways, and we do the best we can. Hindsight, you can always live your life in hindsight. So compassion is just so, so important here. And then the person going forward will then be able to help other women in some kind of a compassionate way. She'll have a way to dialogue and talk about these things. All right?
Thank you, Luang Por. Sadhu. Any questions from the floor? Anyone at all? Please don't be shy. I received an offering, and this person says, hi Beta, hope you're doing well and thanks for organizing the Zoom session. Based on my experience, often the problem with lack of connection is due to a weak Wi-Fi router. Do you think I could donate a possibly better Wi-Fi router to the monastery? If you think this could help, I'll be more than happy to do so. It's the smallest thing I could do, given how much I value the message of Ajahn Viradhammo and Tisarana. Sadhu, Luang Por.
That's very, very generous. But I think we got the best routers going. It's just we're at the end of the line. We're out in the country, and it's the way it is. we've got some pretty tech savvy folk around, but we have a tower, right? We have a tower, and that's the best that. Who do we use?
Explorement.
A thing called ExploreNet, and they deliver it to the countryside, but we don't have. God, I don't know any of this stuff. What cable or?
We have 5G.
5G. I don't know what. Anyway, this is what we got. So thank you to the person, but that's just life in the country. It used to be worse, believe it or not. We used to have one of those radar screens, discs. No, I'm hopeless. But thank you. We're very generous. Just the way it is.
Perhaps, Luang Por, you want to inform people that Tisarana has a new channel on YouTube.
Oh yes.
Which stores a library of your books.
Yeah, and so this talk now we're recording it with an iPad, and so the quality I'm told is very good. So if you didn't hear anything, check out the YouTube station. Sorry, but we put one up last time. Apparently, it was pretty good, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Luang Por, are you comfortable to take a few more questions?
I am happy. Yes.
Okay. So may I please invite Karen? Karen, if you're around, yes.
Hi, Karen. How you doing?
Thank you so much for your teaching. Good, thank you. Luang Por, I prepared this question after your last lecture, and it's wonderful that you actually elaborated on it today. You referred to two of your projects. One is your Arahant project, which you said like coming home, and your Bodhisattva project, which is like going out into the world to help.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, in your experience, what is the mind quality that you hold that manages to achieve both paths simultaneously? Thank you.
I'd say it's holding attention in the heart. That's the secret. Having said that, I'm not a businessman, right? So I'd probably be, I'd probably sell the monastery to someone if I wasn't careful. So I'm not in that mode. But I do find the more I live in the heart, the more I can respond to complexities from a a place of, I would say it's a place of intelligence. Not that my head's that stupid, right? But it is a kind of intelligence which reads life in a way that is very appropriate. But having said that, I have very good friends. They're called monks and stewards and lay people. So I'm very fortunate to live in a large community, and I think that way of like creating something in the world which is of value, like a monastery, a sanctuary, can't be done by an individual. So I always feel if I can lead from the heart, then there's lots of heads around who can help me, who have better analytical skills, and it's delightful actually, because a monastery is it's a place of service as well as practice. The fact that we need things, say like a router, and this person comes forward and say, "Hey, can I get you a router?" That way of a community actually needing help creates community, and so that if I stay in the heart and don't go to worry and all those aversions and so on, and work with those things, but stay in the heart, then both I'm not exhausted at the end of the day, and the Arahant project is enhanced too. So they're not mutually exclusive, because there are stimuli in community life which are not pleasant sometimes, believe it or not, and disagreements and views and opinions and all of that, and to kind of process that through the heart means that I'm not exhausted at the end of the day. But it's a body of work, right? So the monastery or the Bodhisattva project, as I joke, is actually the practice itself, like trying to create something of beauty and significance, and that people can participate is in itself the practice of giving, isn't it? And I'm fortunate that way, is that I don't have to make a profit. And I don't have a mortgage and all the kind of heavy things that lay people have. You have to get food on the table, you have to get your kids to school, through school, and then you have to make sure the company's books are, there's a lot. Lay life is very difficult. And you need all those skills to do that. But if you have no way to regenerate the heart at home or with Kalyanamitta, then it becomes it becomes too worldly, right? So whatever aspect of your worldly life you can make heartfelt. Sometimes, it's just calculative thinking. You have to get on the computer and I don't know, do code or something, or balance the books, and that's just part of getting bread on the table. But cultivating the heart is the part that's often missed out in the business world, because it's not a heartfelt place. And if the environment of the business world or whatever is cutthroat or power, I don't know, I don't live in that world, but that's very, very hard to bear. The heart has a hard time, and the danger is the heart closes down just to survive. So, association with people who you can associate with where there's no fear. That's a huge thing, where you can reveal your pain. You can show people, wow, this is really difficult, and so that your heart is unburdened in some kind of ways. So Kalyanamitta is probably, as we say, that's very, very important, that you get like-minded friends in which you both share Dhamma reflections, but also just are able to feel supported by wholesome people who live morally, who have good intentions, who aspire to the goodness of life. Kalyanamitta is very important, and oftentimes, like in cult, like I think probably Asian culture has more opportunity for Kalyanamitta. Sometimes Western culture people tell me they feel very, very alone, they have no kalyanamitta, or it's hard to find. So those things, like for me as a monk, when I see another monk, I don't see just the person, I see the whole perception of the life of a monk. And that's so very, very helpful, very helpful. Like lay folk, you don't have that, but you do have kalyanamitta. So when you have an association of friends who, yeah, this is a moral person, this is a person who practices dana, this is a person who has faith, this person who practices meditation, you're reminded of those values. If you don't have that, you're not reminded of those values, you can just kind of forget and go with just constantly worldly distractions. But I mean, I have a pretty sweet lifestyle, actually. It's pretty good. Okay.
Hey, Luang Por. Another question. When there is a rejection towards oneself, says, for instance, I feel I hate myself, and I feel there is pain at the heart area. How would you advise Luang Por, this person? This is a question by someone in this group.
Right. Well, I think the key is inquiry rather than fixing or getting rid of or it's the capacity to inquire requires an objective attention to what your inner world is producing. So the inner world is producing thoughts and memories and a strong sense of self. That's what thought is. And that's what the habits of thought are. So the capacity to inquire objectively is what gets you out of the self-narrative into some sense of, oh, this is an object. This feeling of self-hatred is an object. That's the first step. So when Luang Por Sumedho says it's like this, he's asking us to let go of subjectivity and become objective to the feeling of pain. And so that's what inquiry is. So if my mind is running with self-hatred, it might run a whole 2 hours, I might not notice it. I think that's just true. This is the ultimate reality, that I'm a hopeless case. It's not, but that's the delusion, that's delusion sparking. But at some point, this person obviously notices that. And that's the point of awakening. So that's a good thing. But then the thing is to say, don't try to fix this, welcome it. Inquire, make it conscious. This is the enlightenment. Well, what does self-hatred actually feel like? What is it like? And we don't like to go towards that because we don't want it. So you're going towards something you dislike. And that's the secret of working with vibhava tanha. Vibhava tanha is like, push it away. I don't want it. Enough of that. And that might lead to, judging it or whatever, where you have to welcome it in. And that's what affection is about. Metta is about welcoming in the very feeling of self-hatred. How can you be affectionate to self-hatred? Yeah, good question. That's a question you ask yourself. How can I be affectionate to this rubbish? Well, try the other. How can I hate it? Yeah, I can hate this rubbish. The very word rubbish is hateful. Right? And you say, well, what is it like? What does it actually feel like? That's welcoming. Now that's counterintuitive, because your habit is like saying, oh, I've got to fix this. This is horrible stuff, which is more thought. Now you're using one thought, what's this like? And then you're waiting. Make conscious the feeling of self-hatred, and then you're waiting. Oh, and then you start to feel yucky or whatever. And then you want to run away from that. You go into thought. No, come back. What's it really like? Self-hatred. And then you go into thought and you come back. No. And that's why it's a craft. You just got to keep coming back. And you get better and better at it. But if it's a powerful habit which has been going on for 20, 30 years, it's not going to be resolved just in one little meditation. It has karma. And karma is like momentum, isn't it? It's the kind of momentum that comes out. But the fact that now I see it as an object, rather than just be the subject of my self-disparaging thoughts, is a big step. It's the step of awakening. Now you want to enhance that by saying, what's it like? What's it feel like? Come on in. You can stay all day. Oh, great, I haven't seen you for 10 minutes. or whatever. And then you start to get comfortable with being with or welcoming or knowing the feeling of self-hatred. Then it will resolve itself. And that's where the body awareness comes in. Well, what do I do with it? You bring it here. And then what? And you wait. Trust. Shouldn't I fix it? And that goes into thought. No, just trust. Trust. And then because it's anicca and you're not feeding it, the field dies away. And that's one of the definitions of nibbana, the cooling of the fire. But you have to bear the burning sometimes. Huh? You have to bear the burning. And it's sometimes worse than indigestion. It can be very, very powerful. But what else is there to do, right? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Luang Por. There are no more questions from the floor.
Okay. Shall we finish with some chanting? Yeah?
Yes, please, Luang Por.
The Metta Sutta, this was what should be done. Will you get that up?
Yep, I will.
Okay. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, freed from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.